with this. I
Mm,
read that one employee said about Dana White, who's the UFC chair, who's now on the board of Meta. Someone wrote, it's kind of disheartening to see people in the comments celebrating a man who was on video assaulting his wife and another who was recently convicted of rape. Um, Employees were joking that Meta should hire Rogan next. Someone else said, we have completely lost the plot. And apparently, the Meta HR team deleted all of the, I guess they have fact checker, not fact checkers, but content moderation within the company, but they deleted the
mm,
internal employee criticism.
mm.
Um, Wanted to get your thoughts on that move to delete this criticism and um, silence people. And I understand, you have to weigh, you can't have things become too chaotic at a company, but it seems pretty hypocritical if you're saying like we're all about free speech and then the employees can't speak their minds about the decision. So I'd love to hear your thoughts about that.
Yeah, I mean, if that's true, if that's what's being reported, that would be incredibly disheartening. And the reason I say that is I will just start with the caveat of my experience at Meta, Facebook, was wonderful. I mean, look, I think sometimes we have a tendency to romanticize things a little bit after the fact, but I definitely had moments of stress and of like, there's well documented reports of like high performance, high stress, and of course I went through that, but one of the things that I will say that I loved about that company is I felt like the notion of be your authentic self was really, and that was a big value. Be your authentic self um, was something that I absolutely adored about the company. It like took me a while to get comfortable in my skin to feel like I could speak my voice and be heard. And I remember like having that light bulb moment of like, wow, I really can say what I'm feeling here and not get punished for it. To the point where like there was an internal message board, internal like Facebook group, if you will, called shit posting at Facebook or Meta.
Yeah.
And it was wonderful because it was hilarious and people would like openly make fun of the company for things like how much Zuck would waffle on things, and he seemed to have a sense of humor about it. Like he would go in there and laugh at comments and like comments, and I just remember seeing that and like kind of like, this guy gets a bad rap. He's got a good sense of humor. Like he can take it. So to hear that comments are being deleted, if that is true, would be incredibly disappointing and shows like a very much a separation of like what I knew to be of a wonderful company. Not without its problems,
Yeah,
though. Even
of
back then.
course, of
Yeah.
course. Yeah, nothing is perfect.
Yeah.
Yeah, can you tell me a little bit about like your time there and what you were doing and when this was and
Yeah.
um yeah, what it was like back in the good
Yeah.
old
So
days?
yeah, absolutely. And as a matter of fact, I interviewed in 2018. That was right at the heart of the Cambridge Analytica stuff that was going on. And they asked me about that in my interview process of like, how do you feel about this? Just so you know, like this was going on. And again, I'm like, wow, what a breath of fresh air for like a company to be hitting me with like things that most companies would try to sweep under the rug. You know what I mean? And like to be openly talking to me about it during the interview process was really awesome. And I had a lot of respect for that. So interestingly enough, as you referenced, I was a recruiting manager. I actually started off as a recruiter, individual contributor. After a couple of years, I was then, promoted to a manager. And, I supported a variety of teams within the tech recruiting space as well too. So, but also I had my hand in on DEI work. I was the diversity change champ for my team for a number of years, which is really disheartening to hear that stuff like some of those types of roles are going to be eliminated because that was such an important part of what the DNA was of the company. So yeah, hopefully that gives some good
Yeah,
context.
totally. So can you like DEI? and you and I have talked about this before, but it's become such a like buzz phrase that people
Mm,
have latched onto, and it's basically like, oh, it's just, a woman or a person of color who's not qualified that just gets, that comes in, and they simplify it drastically. And certainly not all DEI programs have been perfect, and some of them
of
have been
course.
like really performative and not effective. But like, what are the myths that like need to be busted about all of this in your opinion? And like what is like what like should DEI be, and like and then also, where do you think this is coming from? Do you think it's just Zuckerberg appealing to Trump, or, it can't be good for people's like productivity? He's doing all of this. But yeah, let's start with like, what are the biggest myths about DEI from your perspective, having like recruited people and managing programs?
Yeah, I think there's a tendency to only look at the word diversity in DEI, and in the current state of our political climate, things like diversity are frowned upon, which as I'm saying that out loud, is just like I can't believe like this is the world we live in right now. But there's so much more to it. So I think people misconstrue diversity as sort of like affirmative action, meaning like, okay, there's a quota, if you will, of like how many minorities need to be hired, and that even as progressive as Facebook Meta was, like that never was the case. There was never like, okay, we need to hit this number. Like what the really spirit behind it is just to ensure that we are not bypassing qualified candidates because of the color of their skin or their socioeconomic background, whatever it may be. There were a variety of wonderful programs that I actually helped run and manage. For example, there was this program called the Sorcerer Development Program. Just so everyone knows, like people at Facebook, sorry, I'm so used to calling it Facebook. Like even years later, calling it Meta still feels a little
Yeah.
strange. There's like this feeling that like when we became Meta, it was like Meta swallowed Facebook, and we became like this like completely different entity, and that very much was the case. It felt like that anyway. But people are compensated, like we're talking like life-changing type salaries and compensation structures. And, the notion of like setting people up for like generational wealth like was something that, as recruiters we would talk about, be like, how great is it to give people this opportunity? And so what the Sourcer Development Program was training people who had like no recruiting background to become sourcers, and like that we would target certain not necessarily even like demographics, but like certain, we would like, for example, we would target certain pockets like in inner city Chicago for people, who have the skill set, they just have never had the opportunity to even be considered for something like this. And it was such a
Right.
great program. So I would wager something like that is now no more because of like it was a DEI initiative. Um, when I hear these things are being, again, I just think people only focus on the diversity component and don't really focus on the equity and the other aspects of DEI that make it such an important part. It's more like it's about respect in the workplace. Like if you've ever gone through training on like how to be respectful to talk to each other,
Mhm.
just that's a DEI initiative. How would you feel, Ariella, if you interviewed for the same role as somebody else and you found out that because they knew somebody who knew somebody, they only had to interview with one person while you had to go through like 5, 6 rounds of interviews, and um, like DEI initiatives prevent stuff like that from happening, like and I'm hearing like what Zuck is saying. In full disclosure, I haven't listened to the full. It's 3 hours long. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? But like I'm like making my way through it. I'm hearing him say like it's like kind of like talking out of both sides of your mouth. It's like, oh, we're going to get rid of DEI, but the intent is to be more equitable. And it's like I don't see how that computes. You know what I mean?
Right. What do you think is going to change beyond like programs like the one you just described being eliminated, like the sourcing program? Do you think like are they going to select like very specific types of candidates for specific roles? Like, and then this leads me to my next question about, his obsession with masculinity now. And like,
Mm,
is he think he's going to just be hiring like both men, because both men and women can be masculine, but just like the most
mm.
masculine types of people who are just like aggressive and cutthroat and um may not even be that amazing at their job, but just really good at like being political and sort of forcing their way into things. Like, what do you think will happen? And do you think there will be like a shift to looking at people who are like more masculine in the sense that he's talking about?
I certainly hope not. I mean, I think like that's like it's what it sounds like. Um, he's always talking about he doesn't want to be the arbiter of truth, and I certainly am not either. I just know what I've seen in my experience, particularly post meta days and being in an environment where masculinity was rampant at a company that was pretty misogynistic in its DNA, to its core. And I feel like with removing these programs and saying things like, first of all, what does that even mean? Like, like masculinity, like what are you really saying? I come from the notion of say what you mean what you say, and that kind of messaging is very ambiguous, like what does that look like? So, but I've seen, the companies that have really put a stock in like the aggressive and the stereotypical masculine approach, cutthroat, take no prisoners, and it gets toxic really quickly, pretty really, really quickly. Now, again, that's my experience, and other people could have had different experiences, but I'm here just to kind of give you my take. And if that's the way the culture's going, I could see a very quick path to um, some toxic feelings within the company. I mean, look, I've got friends who still work there, and they're feeling like, what's going
What
on?
if
Like,
they,
yeah,
do you think they'll stick around to see what happens?
I do.
Should we
I do. I think for a couple of reasons. Look, I mean, at the end of the day, people are going to do everything they can to provide for their families and pay their mortgage. And Meta does that very well for a lot of people. Their medical benefits are the best I've ever had, to the point where like I'd go to a doctor's office and they'd be like, "Holy crap, these are the best benefits I've ever seen." And and my wife is like, "Hey, you're gonna try to go back to Meta at some point?" I'm like, I guess if it means that much to you, because like, having that peace of mind is valuable. But I know a lot of people are struggling internally with like their moral compass and like, does this align? I think that they have hope of like, I think you said to me the other day is like how the pendulum can shift. And I think they're just kind of riding it out at this point with the hopes that it might shift back in another direction. I just don't know why things always need to be so extreme. Like why does it have to go to one extreme to the other? I'll use the example as like, if I could speak to it, if that's okay. I know I'm kind of going off on a tangent here,
Yeah,
but
no, go for it.
I think I messaged you that, hey, I bet there's going to be no more tampons in the men's room, right? Like a day later, felt like a psychic. Sure enough, that was the case. And a little bit of context behind that is I remember my first day walking into a bathroom at Facebook at the time, and seeing tampons, and my naivete was like, why the hell are there tampons in the men's bathroom? Then I started to like, oh, okay, I get it. We're very forward, progressive. If someone here was trans and they came in here, there was tampons there. I never thought of it again after that, right? Like it never, like I'd walk into the bathroom and I'd see tampons and be like, well, I don't need one. Okay, I'm not going to take one. Not a big deal, right?
Yeah.
Um, and and so hearing like something like that is being removed, into the fact that they made it a point to make that a public statement, like that says to me there's more to it than really just the notion of like they wanted people to know this for a reason. They wanted